Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina and today's video is all about strawberries. Now, berries are some of the best and healthiest sweet treats that you can ever eat, and that's because they are extremely healthy. They are high in antioxidants, which have been studied and known to help fight certain cancers. They are high in fiber. They are also high in a lot of nutrients such as potassium and vitamin C, just to name a few. Now, the tricky thing about berries is that although they are delicious and healthy, is that they do tend to be a little on the pricey side. Like many healthy foods at the grocery store, right? They are pretty expensive. So a really great way to add more berries in your diet is to grow them yourself. Now, I live in a suburban setting, so you can probably hear sounds of somebody cutting their grass or using the weed eater. That's just life out here in these YouTube streets in suburbia. So sorry about the noise. But I want to give you guys pretty much everything you need to know to get started growing strawberries. This bowl of strawberries was just harvested. I'll show you up close. It's just harvested from my strawberry bed today. I went in, I weighed them after I harvested them, and it's about 18 ounces, so a little more than a pound of berries that I've just harvested today. It is May 2nd, and I've already previously harvested about 2 pounds of strawberries. So this brings me up to 3 pounds of strawberries harvested so far, and I hope to continue to harvest strawberries all summer. So if you are interested in growing strawberries, continue watching because I'm going to tell you how. Now, strawberries are one of the easiest of the different types of berries. It's one of the easiest to grow. They grow in pretty much any climate. Just like with any plant, there are different varieties for different climates. So when you're looking at plants, you want to make sure that you have picked some that will grow well in your area. There are 3 different types of strawberries, 3 main types that are grown most commonly. First, you have your June-bearing varieties. And these varieties, like the name says, they produce a heavy crop of berries, mostly over 2 or 3 weeks, oftentimes in June. But they can come as early as April and as late as June. So those are great if you are trying to get a whole lot of berries at one time. So if you're planning to cook with them, make jam, make pies, things like that, where you need a lot of berries at once, then definitely go with the June-bearing varieties. Other benefits of the June-bearing ones is that they tend to be a lot larger than the other varieties, and they also put out a lot of runners. Runners are the way strawberries like to produce themselves. They send out little plants, and if cultivated, those runners become additional strawberry plants, which of course you can use to replace your strawberry plants when the time comes. So those are some benefits of the June berry. Of course, the downsides is you only get berries over a few weeks, and then those plants are done for the season. Now, another variety of strawberry are everbearing strawberries, which, as the name says, are supposed to produce strawberries all season long, so all summer long. However, in practice, everbearing strawberries tend to produce 2 or 3 crops across the summer, so maybe one heavy one early in the season and then one late in the season, and if it's not too hot, they might produce a crop mid-season as well. So of course, with everbearing varieties, you get fewer strawberries at once, but you do get a longer period of time. So if you want strawberries for fresh eating all season long, then you may want to go with an everbearing variety. Downsides, the berries are smaller than June-bearing varieties. You get fewer at once, and these plants don't send out as many runners. Now, they still will send out a few, so you will get some runners most likely, but they don't send out nearly as many. The other type variety of strawberries that actually fit into the everbearing category, but they're called day-neutral berries. These berries these are more true everbearing because they really do produce all summer long. Now, when we get this crazy heat like we do in North Texas, they may slow down a bit when it's like, 95, 100 degrees out, but they generally will produce most of the summer, so you really do get berries the whole season. These also produce smaller berries than June-bearing, and they do send out fewer runners as well. So kind of depending on what you want to do with your berries will help you determine which type you want. Now, in my strawberry garden, I actually have all 3 types of plants. I have some June-bearing, I have some day-neutral, and some everbearing. My June-bearing variety is called it's like Honioi. I can't pronounce it. I'll put it on the screen. My ever-bearing variety is Ozark Beauty, and my day neutral variety is TriStar. Now remember, I'm growing in North Texas, right outside of Dallas, zone 8A. So the varieties that you choose, even of the different types of strawberries, will probably be different if you're living in a different climate. So as you're looking for berry plants, you want to make sure that you're growing for your specific climate and grow zone. Now that looking at my nice bowl of strawberries has probably gotten you interested, probably wondering, okay, I want to grow some strawberries, what do I need? Well, of course, you need strawberry plants. Now, in general, strawberry plants will produce about 1.5 pounds to 3 pounds in their best growing season. So generally they're not going to produce that much the season you plant them, but the following season and then the season after that tend to be their 2 best seasons for producing. And then after that 3rd season, you probably want to go ahead and replace the plants with runners or with new plants. But 1.5 to 3 pounds of berries in their peak production years. So an average person, and this was, I believe, was a Louisiana study, University of Louisiana, something like that. I'll put it on the screen to give credit for where I read this. But Americans tend to eat about 5 pounds of strawberries a year. So if you're thinking 5 pounds per person, then that means you need about 2 to 3 plants per person. So if you want to aim on the high side, 3 plants. And that way, even if your berries are only producing about 2 pounds per person, 2 pounds per plant, then you're still getting 6 pounds per person. So I would do about 3 plants per person if you're, low on space and you just want just enough. Now, of course, you can do a lot more than that because people tend to eat about 5 pounds of strawberries, but I'm willing to bet most people aren't growing strawberries, so that's part of the reason they don't eat as many. If you're growing them, you might want to eat a lot more than that. So my raised bed, my goal would be to have at least 48 plants. I don't have quite that many yet in my 12x4 raised bed. I'll give you guys a look at that right now. I'll put that on the screen so you can see my entire bed. Now, as far as getting your strawberry plants, there are a couple different ways to buy plants. The one I recommend is buying bare root strawberry plants, mainly because it's the most economical and it's effective. I purchased mine from online nurseries. Last year I purchased some from Gurney's and I purchased some from Stark Brothers. I would recommend, if you're buying bare root, definitely check them out. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I just recommend because I purchased from them and they turned out great. Now, the reason why I had to purchase plants twice is because I did have a few issues. I filled my bed and I used some composted cow manure, but it was not fully broken down, and I didn't realize that. I should have known by the smell and the fact that it attracted flies, but I planted my strawberries into that, and a lot of them just didn't make it because the soil was not composted. It was not fully composted, so it was just a bad environment for them. So later on, about a month later, I decided to order some more plants, and I ordered some from Stark Brothers, and I planted them in rain gutters to grow along my fence. Show you guys a picture of that right here. And they actually seem to do well. The plants did take well, the bare roots, and they seem to grow well, but I learned that this is not the environment to do that. I've seen people do it, and that's where I got the idea from Pinterest or YouTube, but it just didn't work because it was just too hot. And so the containers were just too shallow for growing berries, in something that shallow, because I would have to water them like more than once a day, like sometimes twice a day. They would dry out. It just didn't work. So for my climate, I don't recommend doing it that way, but maybe in northern cooler climates, it can work. But what I did was, over the winter, back in January, I took all the plants, the rain gutters down off of my fence, and I planted the plants in the raised bed that I had them in originally. Now last year, this raised bed, I grew some okra in it, I grew a lot of herbs, so I did use the bed after the kind of cow manure smell, kind of like, I think it just broke down over time, and I planted some other things in here that did okay. And so, though the season was up for them, and so then I just added some fresh compost, a fresh layer of compost, and repurposed this bed for strawberries again. And I'll show you guys some footage of that right now. So here is the raised bed that we're planting the strawberries in. There is some mulch on top from last season, but a lot of it has broken down, except right over here where the strawberries are. And of course, I'm not planting right in that area. So because it has already started breaking down, I'm just gonna cover it rather than like raking it off, because there's no real point in doing that. So putting a fresh, nice thick layer of compost so that these strawberries can have the best growing medium possible. And of course, because they are perennials, you know, you wanna make sure that they're planted in really nice fertile soil. So I have my little helper over here dumping compost. That's way too heavy for her. But yeah, we're gonna get busy. I'm gonna get over there and help her. But all right, so now it's done. Just spread compost for a top layer. So the reason I recommend, another reason I recommend bare root plants, I don't remember if I said this already, but the reason I recommend bare root plants is just because they are incredibly economical. You can get like a bundle of 25 plants for $10 or $11, and maybe even cheaper if you're buying more than that. But that comes out to, you know, around 40 cents, 45 cents maybe a plant, which to me is a great price. So that's one of the reasons I recommend buying them bare root. Another way you can buy strawberry plants are just buying strawberry plugs. And these essentially are those runner plants, but they've been rooted. So when you purchase them, they're already live growing plants. So you're not purchasing dormant bare root plants, you're purchasing live growing plants. And of course, this has some benefits, right? Because the plant is live and growing, so when you transplant it, you're not waiting for it to come out of dormancy. It's already growing, which means you're gonna have better transplant success with the strawberry plugs. The difficulty though is if you look up trying to find strawberry plugs, you tend to have to buy at least 50 plants, and they are more expensive. You're gonna pay like 75 to 80 cents a plant or more. So you're definitely paying a lot more for those plants. Now my experience with bare root is that the plants that I purchased, they generally did really well. Like almost all of them came out of dormancy. I had a few losses, but most of the plants came out of dormancy, and within about a week, they were actively growing and growing new leaves. So it doesn't take a long time for them to come out of dormancy at all. And so if you are considering strawberry plants, now is probably a great time to get some. Get them established. You probably won't get a lot of berries this year, but next year you'll get plenty. So now is a great time to start growing your strawberries. Now the only kind of plants I don't really recommend are buying the live potted plants, and that's only because they're just really expensive. Like you might pay $4 or $5 for just one single strawberry plant just because they've potted it up and it looks nice and growing, and you know, it looks nice and big and healthy and it's growing. Sometimes they already even have berries on them. There's nothing wrong with these plants. They probably will do great in your garden, but if you're trying to purchase more than like 5 plants, I wouldn't go the potted plant route because it's just way more expensive. And a lot of times the potted plants that you buy in a nursery or, you know, big box store, they tend to be plants that were bare root just like 2-3 weeks ago. So it's not, you're not getting a lot for your money. Now, of course, if you just need 5 strawberry plants, you're putting them in a planter, that's all you're doing, then that probably makes sense for you. You don't need 25 bare root plants. But sometimes you can get a bundle of 10 bare roots, so that's up to you. There's nothing wrong with those plants. It's just a lot more expensive to procure the plants that you want. So, what type of soil? Strawberry plants grow best in well-draining soil. They don't like to be wet or soggy. They need plenty of water, but they don't like to be wet or soggy. But they grow best in well-draining soil that is rich in organic matter. So whatever bed you're using, give it a nice layer of compost before you plant your strawberry plants, and they will be happy. They also require a lot of sunlight, like at least 6 hours of sunlight, but if you can get them some all-day sun, that's what mine get, and they love it. They will produce for you, and they will be nice and happy. And most berries and fruiting vegetables need, you know, fruiting plants need full sun. So lots of sun, well-draining soil, rich in organic matter. So let's say you've ordered your bare root plants, you're ready to plant them, so you probably want to know how to do that. Well, it's actually pretty simple. With strawberry plugs, of course, that's self-explanatory. You just plant them like you would any other transplant. With bare root plants, what I like to do with mine, and I'll show you some images here and some footage, but what I like to do with my bare root plants is once I unwrap the bundle of plants, and you want to get them unwrapped and stuff when you're ready. So when you order your bare root plants, be prepared. Watch that tracking information if you're ordering them. Of course, if you're going to the store and you find some, then great. But if you're ordering them, watch the tracking, watch the shipping. Order them so that they're going to arrive on a day where you're going to be able to plant them that day or the next. I wouldn't want to wait much longer than that. The longer you wait, the probably more plant losses you're going to have. So schedule it such that you will be able to plant those plants when you get them. Once you open up your bundle of bare root plants, cut the rubber band, have them all laid out, then what you want to do is soak them in water. I only do this for about 30 minutes just to make sure that they're nice and moist and, you know, ready to be planted. Soak them in water, and then once you've soaked them, I like to cut off the part of the roots so that I leave about 1.5 inches of the roots on the plant. And this is just cutting off the dead ends of the roots. And to me, 1, it makes them easier to plant because you're not dealing with those long, straggly roots. And 2, you've gotten rid of that dead matter so the plant can establish itself. This has worked great for me in planting my bare root strawberries. Like I said, I had hardly any losses. Pretty much everything, you know, came out of dormancy really nicely. And then the second thing you want to remember when planting your strawberry plants is that you want to make sure that you keep the crown above the ground. Don't bury the entire plant. You have to leave the crown, and the crown is the area of the plant where the stems, the leaves grow out of. So you have the roots down at the bottom, and then you have the crown right there. That's the part that needs to stay above the ground. So essentially you cover the roots right up until the part, and if you feel it, it feels kind of hard right there. But that's where the stems will grow out of. You want to make sure that you leave that above the ground. So when you pot them, they're going to look like a brown, dirty, like half inch or inch long stick sticking out of the ground. That's what you want. Then you water them in, and in a few days, your plants are going to start to green up, and they'll start coming out of dormancy. And it's that simple. And then they'll just start growing, and then you can go on. Now, when you plant them, you can plant them directly into the place where you're going to grow them, or you can plant them into like cups and let them green up from there. and then figure out where you want to put them, because maybe you want to put some in a raised bed, and then there's some that you want to just find places for them throughout the garden. You can do that as well. Now, of course, that means you're planting them twice, so that's double the work, but that definitely makes sense if you're not exactly sure where you're going to put your berries, or you haven't quite prepared the place for them. Then just plant them into cups or pots and then transplant them when you're ready. Now, if you have strawberry plants that are compatible with your environment and compatible with your grow zone, then you should not have any issues with them over winter. You don't have to cover them or anything like that while they're in the winter season. They will go dormant. They will kind of, the leaves will start to turn brown, most of them. Here, we didn't have a very cold winter, so some of my plants the leaves didn't even go brown on them. They just kind of died eventually and shed. But if you get the correct plants for your growing zone, then they should be fine in winter. You don't have to do anything special with them as far as preparing them for winter. They kind of overwinter where they are. So that's another important thing about buying the right plants for you. And in the spring, you may not realize that you have, in the spring, pretty much every plant is gonna grow no matter where it's suited to grow. But in the heat of summer and in the winter is when it really matters that you have the right plants that are acclimated for your climate. Now, as far as interplanting with strawberries, you don't have to plant, a monoculture of just strawberries. I tend to do more of that in my garden. I plant like a lot of the same thing together, but I do like to kind of squeeze in other things that are going to be helpful, like herbs and alliums that are going to help with pest control for my plants because of the strong scents that might deter certain pests. And within my strawberry bed, I have onions planted throughout. This actually wasn't something that was planned. I grew onions from seed for my garden, and then I had a lot of plants, and so I gave some of them away to my mom, and then I still had some left, and I just kind of last minute, after they had probably been in the seed tray way too long, I decided to plant them into my strawberry bed, and they're doing great. They're actually starting to bulb. I need to dig around them. They probably won't be big because I planted them so late. They were stunted by being stuck in the seed tray, but I'm sure they've been helpful with pests, with deterring pests. And I've also in my bed, I have some zinnias growing. Most of those I'm gonna pull out. Those are just volunteers from last year because I had some zinnias in this bed. I had all kinds of things growing in this bed last year, but I had some zinnias in this bed and they reseeded. So some of them I'm pulling out and putting other places. Some of them I have to pull out and they're gonna have to sadly pass away. But, but you'll see some of those in here. And I also have cilantro growing. Not 10 days ago did I cut down this cilantro quite a bit and harvested a bunch of it, and it is back with a vengeance. So I'm gonna trim a bunch of that down today so it's not blocking out my strawberries. And as my plants this summer start to produce runners, I'll probably pull a lot of that cilantro up. That's another volunteer too. I was growing cilantro in this bed, it seeded, reseeded itself, and grew this year. So I'm harvesting the cilantro because cilantro is amazing, but I'm not gonna let it take over. I have it growing in some other places in my garden too. So I'll eventually pull that up so that I have space to place the runners to eventually fill out this bed with strawberry plants. So the last thing I wanna make sure that, or maybe not the last thing, but another thing you guys need to know about strawberry plants is that, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but just to be clear, strawberry plants are perennials, but they don't last, for years and years and years like fruit trees. Strawberry plants last 4 years at best, but essentially you want to think about years 2 and years 3 as their primary growing years. So let's say you plant them in the spring of 1 year. That year you may get a few berries depending on whether they're June. If they're June bearing, probably not, but if they are ever-bearing varieties, you'll probably get some berries in the late summer. So that's kind of year 1, but you're not going to get much. Then year 2 is when you'll get a full crop of those plants having been established, and then they'll go dormant. And then year 3 you'll get another nice full crop of those berries, and then at that point, at the end of the season, that's when you'll want to take them out and replace them, whether you've been kind of constantly filling in with runners or you purchase new plants. And that's because years 4 and beyond, they might still grow, they might still produce a little for you, but it's not gonna be what you saw in those other years. So rather than waste that space and only get a few berries, go ahead and pull them out, replace them. So if you're kind of paying attention and you're getting runners and rooting those runners, then you can have a constant supply of strawberry plants and not have to ever buy anymore. Now you may have to over the winter kind of rearrange them. Like strawberry plants are perfectly fine being picked up and divided and, you know, moved around while dormant, so you can rearrange your bed to make sure you have the plants where you need them. But you can really keep it going without having to buy new plants if you're paying attention and rooting your runners and letting them grow into your new plants and keeping track of which plants were planted in what year. But that is something important to know. They don't last forever. And then lastly, fertilization. I fertilize my strawberries once they start breaking out of dormancy in the spring is when I fertilize them. And I use an organic balanced fertilizer. I use my, I believe I use my Garden Tone, my Espoma Garden Tone. I don't remember, or if I may have had some, the Miracle Grow Organics left when I planted these, because most of these plants, yeah, I don't remember which one, but you want to use an organic, I like an organic balanced fertilizer. I do that right when they start breaking out of dormancy, and I may hit them again later in the season just to keep up the vigor and keep up the growth, like maybe in a few months. I'm thinking like late June, maybe mid-July. They don't need a lot of fertilizer, and you don't want to over-fertilize them, especially not with too much nitrogen to encourage a lot of leafy growth and not a lot of blooms. That's why I just like to stick with a balanced fertilizer. Now, of course, you can use water solubles, you can use fish emulsion, you can do all kinds of things with them, but I prefer granular, slow-release organic fertilizers for the most part in my garden because it just keeps things simple. Pretty much anything that's fruiting, I'm using mostly an organic balanced fertilizer for it. And for my leafy greens, I use something that's an organic, something that's a little bit higher in nitrogen. And that's mostly what I use for pretty much everything, aside from like onions, and then my muscadines get something a little different. But that's what I use to grow them, and that has done really well. Look at all these berries, y'all. So hopefully this has given you all the information you need to start growing strawberries and to get those in the ground or take care of the plants that you have. I definitely recommend it. Get those antioxidants, get those vitamins from your backyard, and save that money. So thank you for sticking around till the end of this video. If you have not done so already, go ahead and hit that like, go ahead and subscribe to my channel for more content. And until we meet again, have a great one. Bye.